Abdullah bin Fahd al-Aidan, advisor to the Minister of Islamic Affairs of Saudi Arabia, and Pope Francis began their encounter with this long greeting.
On the second of a three-day trip to Turkey, Pope Francis joined Grand Mufti Rami Yaran on Saturday in a tour of the Blue Mosque.
Pope Francis stepped into a Saudi Arabian mosque, shocking the world and breaking traditions that had lasted for centuries. His white robe shone brightly against the grand walls of the King Saud Grand Mosque. He entered alone, without guards or helpers. The worshippers froze, their eyes wide with disbelief. What happened next will never be forgotten, as it seemed to bring the darkest prophecies to life. Breaking barriers in sacred spaces. Pope Francis made waves with his groundbreaking trip to the United Arab Emirates, marking the first time a pope set foot in a predominantly Muslim region. This wasn't a casual trip or a diplomatic formality. It was a historic moment brimming with meaning and loaded with tension. The sight of the Catholic leader walking into the grandiose Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Abu Dhabi left people talking for days. But what came next was even more striking, and it happened in Saudi Arabia. But what came next was even more striking. In Saudi Arabia, a gesture that redefined interfaith dialogue. The visit was more than just an agenda item. It was a monumental step into uncharted territory, shaking up centuries of religious separation. The King Saud Grand Mosque in Saudi Arabia became the epicenter of an event that no one could have predicted. The day started like any other. The streets around the mosque buzzed with activity. People in all sorts of attire, from work uniforms to carefully arranged traditional garb, converged on the sacred site. Kids laughed and darted between their parents, while elders leaned against the mosque's pillars, fingers moving over prayer beads in a rhythm as old as time itself. It was an ordinary day until it wasn't. Inside the mosque, the sermon was underway. Imam Abdul Rahman, a familiar figure to many in the congregation, delivered his message with the same conviction he brought every week. His voice carried through the room, drawing nods and smiles from the worshippers. But then, the unexpected happened. A shift in attention. The sound of footsteps on polished tiles broke the steady cadence of his words. Heads turned toward the entrance, curiosity replacing calm focus. Standing in the doorway was a figure unmistakably out of place, yet commanding in presence. The pontiff, clad in his stark white cassock, paused briefly before stepping forward. With quiet respect, he removed his shoes, a small but meaningful gesture that rippled through the room. Murmurs grew into hushed exclamations as the realization spread. The leader of the Catholic Church was here, in this sacred space, unannounced and unaccompanied by the usual entourage of Swiss guards. The energy in the room shifted. Whispers floated through the air. Why is he here? What does this mean? This wasn't just any visitor. This was a moment loaded with symbolism, an act of humility and courage that bridged divides few dared to cross. The figure in white moved forward with deliberate calm, his steps echoing in the silence that had settled over the room. The congregation's initial shock gave way to a profound sense of something greater happening. The visit wasn't about grand speeches or political maneuvers, it was about presence, being there, in that moment, among people of a different faith. For decades, tensions between different religious groups had been a source of division. Here was a gesture that said something without words. Unity is possible. As he knelt among the worshippers, it wasn't about erasing differences, but acknowledging them with respect. For the Catholic leader, this was a continuation of his mission to foster understanding between faiths. His earlier visits to mosques in places like Turkey and the United Arab Emirates were preludes to this defining moment. Each step he took was a challenge to centuries of animosity, a bold statement that faith could be a force for peace rather than division. This wasn't just about theology or religion, though. It was about humanity. The pontiff's gesture resonated with something deeper, something universal. In a world increasingly fragmented by differences, his visit was a reminder of the shared values that unite us: compassion, humility, and the pursuit of peace. As the day unfolded, the impact of the visit became evident. The conversations it sparked extended far beyond the mosque's walls. This wasn't just a moment in history, it was a seed planted for the future. Whether it grows into something larger remains to be seen, but one thing is certain, it left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. This wasn't just about what the leader of the Catholic Church did that day, it was about what it meant for all of us. The King Saud Grand Mosque was not just any mosque. Its towering minarets and expansive courtyards were a testament to the architectural brilliance of Islamic culture. The sheer scale of the place was awe-inspiring, with intricately designed mosaics adorning the walls and ceilings, and the floor beneath gleamed as though it were polished daily by an army of caretakers. On this day, every corner of the mosque seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the moment unfolding within its sacred space. The white cassock of the visitor seemed almost surreal against the rich, earthy tones of the mosque. His presence in this environment was a visual reminder of the barriers being crossed. His movements were measured and respectful, his hands occasionally clasped together as if in silent prayer. The simplicity of his action spoke volumes, cutting through the complexity of centuries-old divisions. The worshippers' reactions were varied. Some looked on with wide-eyed curiosity, while others exchanged hushed words with those beside them. A few bowed their heads in contemplation, perhaps considering the significance of the moment. Children, who had been playing moments before, stood still, their innocent gazes fixed on the unusual sight before them. This was a scene that would remain etched in their memories, a story they would tell for years to come. As the visitor reached the front of the prayer hall, he lowered himself to the ground, kneeling among the rows of worshippers. This act of humility, this willingness to share in the rituals of another faith, carried an undeniable weight. It was not about blending in or pretending to be something he was not. It was about standing, or kneeling in this case, in solidarity with others, acknowledging their beliefs and practices with respect. Outside the mosque, the news of the visit spread rapidly. The streets, once bustling with the usual activities of daily life, were now abuzz with speculation and discussion. People gathered in small groups, sharing their thoughts and reactions. Some expressed admiration for the Catholic leader's courage, while others questioned the implications of his visit. Regardless of their opinions, there was no denying the historic nature of what had just occurred. As the mosque settled, Pope Francis prepared for the next step in his journey, a prayer mat and a pontiff. The Pope did not need any grand entrance or grandstanding. His presence alone carried weight. He spoke about how Christians were called to be peacemakers, urging everyone to rise above disagreements. For a brief heartbeat, it felt like the room itself paused, like time held its breath. Here he was, sitting humbly on a prayer mat in the mosque, the leader of the Catholic Church himself. This was not a typical scene, and it would stay etched in the memories of everyone there long after the day was over. Even the Imam, Abdul Rahman, had to collect himself after spotting the unexpected guest. It was not every day such a prominent figure walked into a mosque. Quickly recovering, the Imam offered a respectful nod, which was returned with a small, quiet bow. As the Imam's sermon continued, the message of love filled the space. He described love not as some fleeting feeling, but as an active choice, a commitment to kindness, forgiveness, and connection despite differences. These were not just pretty words. They hit home, resonating deeply with everyone, including the revered visitor. Love, in its truest form, transcends religion, culture, and race. It is the foundation of peace, the bridge between hearts, and the path to genuine understanding. This was not a new idea for the spiritual leader, whose teachings also center on love and unity. The Vatican had long promoted this idea on a global scale, emphasizing the power of love to heal divisions. The best way to combat indifference, it insisted, was to stay aware of the struggles faced by others and to act with compassion. The mosque buzzed with an almost electric energy as the sermon went on. Eyes kept sneaking glances at the white cassocked figure sitting quietly among the worshippers. Outwardly, he looked calm, but inside, his thoughts were racing. For years, he had witnessed Christianity and Islam being pitted against each other, painted as enemies in an endless cycle of misunderstanding. Yet he knew better. The shared values of compassion, charity, and devotion to God were undeniable. At 87, the aged pontiff was navigating the hurdles of old age with a kind of resilience that few could match. His recent surgery to fix a hernia was just one of the physical battles he had faced, along with the ever-present ache of sciatica, which often slowed his steps. Yet here he was, standing tall and determined, not allowing his physical limitations to overshadow the fire within him. This visit to a mosque in the heart of the Central African Republic was not just another stop on his tour. It was a moment he intended to leave a lasting lasting mark. The message was straightforward but profound. Unity, peace, and compassion must take precedence over division. He spoke with a raw honesty, acknowledging his frailty while emphasizing the strength of his conviction. He reminded those gathered that faith, be it Christian, Muslim, or any other, was built on a foundation of love, mercy, and care for the vulnerable. His words carried weight, not because of grand gestures, but because of their authenticity. As he shared his reflections on peace and unity, the atmosphere in the mosque grew heavy with emotion, and many in the congregation found themselves nodding in agreement or wiping away tears. He reflected on the teachings of both Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad, drawing parallels that highlighted the shared moral compass between Christianity and Islam. His voice, though soft, carried an undeniable strength as he spoke of the urgent need to move past conflicts and focus on building a better world, a world that teaches unity instead of division. This wasn't just a religious leader's plea, it was a human appeal, a call to action for anyone willing to listen. The physical toll on the elderly cleric was evident, but it seemed only to fuel his determination. Despite his visible exhaustion, his words carried the kind of hope that could inspire change. He spoke of a future where bridges replaced walls, urging the congregation to see their differences not as barriers but as opportunities for connection. His message wasn't just about coexistence, it was about genuine understanding and shared humanity. As his words sank in, the room fell silent. This wasn't the kind of silence that comes from boredom or indifference. It was the quiet that follows a truth too profound to immediately process. The congregation listened, their hearts absorbing the message. It was a moment of stillness that spoke volumes, highlighting the gravity of his words. The quiet inside the mosque deepened, setting the stage for what was to come. Seeds of hope. The most striking moment came when Imam Abdul Rahman stepped forward. The two leaders, one Christian, one Muslim, shared a handshake that quickly turned into a warm embrace. It was a simple act, yet its impact was monumental. The sight of these two figures, representing different faiths, coming together in such a heartfelt way was a visual declaration that unity was possible. It wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a statement that resonated deeply with everyone present. The congregation's response was equally powerful. Inspired by what they had witnessed, some began to embrace one another, breaking down the invisible barriers that had kept them apart. The mosque, once a place of individual worship, became a space of collective connection. The air buzzed with a sense of shared purpose, a reminder that kindness and unity cost nothing but can achieve so much. For the pontiff, this moment was about more than the immediate impact. It was about planting a seed, a small but significant step toward a larger goal. He knew that true transformation didn't come from grand speeches or media headlines. It came from genuine human connection, from small acts of understanding that ripple outward to create lasting change. As he looked around the mosque, he saw the beginnings of that ripple effect. Faces that had once been guarded were now open. Eyes that had been skeptical now held hope. The leader's vulnerability added an extra layer of authenticity to his message. He didn't shy away from acknowledging his limitations. Instead, he used them to underline his humanity. This wasn't a figure preaching from a pedestal. It was a man sharing his heart, hoping to inspire others to do the same. His physical frailty contrasted sharply with the strength of his spirit, creating a powerful image that lingered long after the visit ended. As the congregation began to disperse, the spiritual guide remained seated, his gaze fixed on the intricate patterns of the mosque's ceiling. He seemed lost in thought, reflecting on the weight of what had just transpired. This wasn't just another stop on his itinerary. It was a moment that would stay with him, shaping his mission moving forward. The imam approached him once more, their exchange brief but filled with mutual respect. The two men, representing two of the world's largest religions, had found common ground in their shared pursuit of peace. Their parting embrace was a final unspoken promise to continue working toward a better future. For those who remained in the mosque, this interaction was a reminder of what faith could achieve when stripped of politics and prejudice. The visit didn't make international headlines, and perhaps that was for the best. It was an intimate moment, shielded from the sensationalism that often accompanies high-profile events. The few blurry photos that emerged online failed to capture the depth of what had happened, but for those who were there, the memory of that that day was indelible. It was proof that unity wasn't just a lofty ideal, but a tangible reality, achievable through acts of courage and compassion. As the Holy Father left the mosque, the weight of the moment stayed with him. He carried with him the warmth of the Imam's words, the hope in the congregation's eyes, and the belief that this was just the beginning. This wasn't just a fleeting moment of goodwill, it was the start of something bigger. For him, it was a deeply personal experience, one that would inform his mission long after he returned to Rome. The simplicity of the encounter, a heartfelt embrace, genuine smiles, and shared words of understanding was a testament to the quiet power of change. True transformation doesn't need fanfare. It starts small, like a seed planted in fertile soil. And as the papal car pulled away, he couldn't help but feel that this visit, though brief, had the potential to grow into something beautiful. It was a moment of unity that transcended faith, a reminder that at its core, religion isn't about division, but about connection and the shared pursuit of something greater than oneself. The journey to this moment had been long and filled with challenges. His age and health had been constant reminders of his mortality, yet they had also fueled his sense of urgency. He understood that time was a finite resource, and he wanted to use it to foster understanding and bridge gaps. His trip to the Central African Republic was more than a diplomatic mission. It was a testament to his commitment to peace. The mosque itself was a symbol of resilience. Situated in a city that had seen its fair share of conflict, it stood as a place of refuge and reflection. For many in the congregation, the visit was a powerful acknowledgement of their struggles and a gesture of solidarity. It was a reminder that their voices mattered and that they were not alone in their pursuit of harmony. His words echoed long after he left. They were repeated in conversations, shared in quiet moments of reflection, and even written down by some who wanted to preserve the memory of that day. His message of unity and compassion resonated deeply, not because it was new, but because it was needed. In a world often divided by politics, religion, and cultural differences, his call for understanding was a beacon of hope. The images of the spiritual leader and the Imam embracing circulated among those who had been present, becoming a symbol of what was possible when people chose connection over conflict. These images, though not widely publicized, carried a quiet power. They were a reminder that even in a world fraught with division, moments of unity could still shine through.
A cardinal's challenge to the Pope. While this public confrontation captured global attention, sources close to the Vatican suggest that the tension between Cardinal Luis and Pope Francis runs deeper than anyone initially thought. Behind closed doors, the debate has become even more intense, with both sides standing firm on their beliefs. In July of 2023, 5 conservative cardinals submitted a set of highly controversial questions known as dubia to Pope Francis. Before we delve into this, it's clear that the conflict between Cardinal Luis and Pope Francis is far more intense than anyone could have imagined, and this won't be the only revelation that will shock you. These questions didn't just scratch the surface. They hit at core issues like homosexuality and the role of women in the church, topics that have long been considered untouchable by traditionalists. When Pope Francis responded on October 2nd, his answers were nothing short of groundbreaking, upending decades of traditional approaches and leaving many wondering if the Church is on the verge of its most radical transformation since Vatican II. Cardinal Luis's path to this pivotal moment is as fascinating as the debate itself. Born in Manila in 1957, he quickly rose through the ranks of the Church, earning a reputation as a scholarly and devout leader. His doctorate from the Catholic University of America focused on issues that are now at the center of this theological storm, making him a well-prepared adversary in this intellectual and spiritual battle. However, his rise has not been without controversy. Allegations of political meddling during his tenure in the Philippines added a layer of intrigue to his already complex profile, though these claims were dismissed by many of his peers. On the other side of this debate stands Pope Francis, a figure who has redefined what it means to be a modern pope. Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Argentina, he broke barriers as the first Latin American and Jesuit to hold the papal office. Since his election in 2013, Pope Francis has implemented sweeping changes, addressing issues like climate change, economic inequality, and scandals within the Church. His willingness to engage with controversial topics has earned him the nickname Digital Pope, thanks in part to his vast social media following of over 53 million across multiple platforms. But his reforms have not come without resistance. While his transparency initiatives have led to a 67% increase in reported violence cases, they have also raised questions about the Church's ability to address these challenges effectively. The philosophical divide between Cardinal Luis and Pope Francis became even more apparent throughout 2023. While Pope Francis has pushed for global reforms and broader inclusion, Cardinal Luis has emphasized the importance of tradition and localized practices. For instance, in his home country of the Philippines, grassroots spirituality remains deeply rooted in traditional devotional practices like the Sacred Heart. This stark contrast between global vision and local tradition highlights the challenges the Church faces in balancing modernization with its rich heritage. Cardinal Luis's focus on maintaining a strong connection between pastors and the faithful underscores his belief that human relationships, purified by divine grace, are the cornerstone of the Church's mission. As these two leaders continue to navigate the complexities of church governance, their differing views on synodality have become a focal point of discussion. Pope Francis has championed structural changes aimed at increasing lay participation and women's leadership within the Church. Cardinal Luis, while supportive of these initiatives, has subtly hinted at a more measured approach. He has expressed concerns that without a strong foundation of human relationships, the Church's reforms risk becoming overly bureaucratic and detached from the spiritual lives of its members. This measured critique has resonated with many traditionalists who fear that rapid change could dilute the essence of the Catholic faith. One of the most significant moments in this ongoing debate came with the publication of Pope Francis's encyclical Delete Nos on October 24th. This document, which explores the spiritual identity of individuals and their connection to others, has sparked widespread discussion about the balance between tradition and reform. While it received less attention than some of his previous writings, such as Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, it revealed underlying tensions within the Church's leadership. Cardinal Luis's response to the encyclical was both diplomatic and cautious, acknowledging the Pope's vision while emphasizing the importance of traditional devotional practices. As the debate deepens, Cardinal Tagel's actions show the struggle between holding on to tradition and embracing change. The future of faith in two paths. As the Catholic Church approaches its 2025 Jubilee, the contrasting visions of Pope Francis and Cardinal Luis will likely shape its future direction. Both leaders share a commitment to hope and renewal, but their paths to achieving these goals are markedly different. Pope Francis' bold reforms aim to address global challenges and foster a more inclusive church, while Cardinal Luis's approach prioritizes tradition and localized spirituality. This dynamic tension reflects the broader challenges facing the Church as it seeks to remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. The stakes in this debate are incredibly high. For Pope Francis, the push for reform represents an opportunity to modernize the Church and address long-standing issues that have alienated many Catholics. For Cardinal Luis, the preservation of tradition is essential to maintaining the Church's spiritual integrity and connection to its roots. Their differing perspectives highlight the complexity of leading an institution that must navigate both the demands of the modern world and the weight of centuries-old traditions. Cardinal Luis Antonio Taglia's approach to reform within the Catholic Church has drawn attention for its measured and thoughtful progress. After Pope Francis released his encyclical on October 24, 2023, Cardinal Tagle immersed himself in its significance, particularly with the Jubilee in mind. As pro-prefect of the Dicastery for Evangelization, he called for centering love in church life and emphasized the Sacred Heart of Jesus as a beacon of hope for a fractured world. Drawing from his Filipino roots, Tagle highlighted the deep spiritual connection his country has with the Sacred Heart, reflecting on its impact on his own upbringing. This context gave the encyclical an even more personal and profound meaning for those in the Philippines. The release of the encyclical, titled Dilexit Nos, came as a surprise to many, especially as it followed Pope Francis's earlier social doctrine works, Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. Cardinal Tagle described Pope Francis as a pope of surprises, explaining that the timing, while unexpected, made sense in light of the Church's focus on Jesus' love and the Sacred Heart. He suggested that this document acted as a bridge between Francis's earlier teachings, clarifying their Christ-centered foundations. By connecting social teachings to the love of Jesus, the encyclical offered a new lens for understanding the Pope's broader message. Cardinal Tagle encouraged readers to revisit the earlier works, noting traces of Dilexit Nos already embedded within them. In the Philippines, where devotion to the Sacred Heart is deeply rooted, this encyclical resonated strongly. Tagle's reflection on its themes tied into his consistent focus on promoting unity and hope in a divided world. His participation as Pope Francis's special envoy at the National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis in July 2024 further illustrated his commitment to fostering spiritual growth. There, he urged Catholics to see life as a gift rather than an achievement, emphasizing the Eucharist's transformative power. While his message aligned with Catholic doctrine, some saw it as a subtle redirection of focus toward traditional practices over some of Pope Francis's progressive priorities.
Tagle's leadership style is defined by a balance of diplomacy and principle. His unwavering advocacy for the marginalized, particularly in the Philippines and globally, showcases his dedication to addressing poverty and corruption. Despite potential backlash from powerful entities, he remains steadfast in championing the vulnerable. This approach reflects his broader vision for the Church, rooted in both intellectual rigor and practical compassion. His early academic achievements, including a doctorate in sacred theology from the Catholic University of America, laid the foundation for his influential career. Throughout his ministry, Cardinal Tagle has consistently bridged the gap between scholarly insight and pastoral care. After his ordination in 1982, he served as a parish priest and taught theology, further enriching his understanding of the faith. Recognition of his talents came quickly. In 1997, Pope John Paul II appointed him to the Vatican's International Theological Commission. By 2001, he became Bishop of Imus, Philippines, where he prioritized humility and close connections with his community. A decade later, he was named Archbishop of Manila and subsequently elevated to the College of Cardinals by Pope Benedict XVI, making him one of the youngest cardinals at the time. Cardinal Tagle's leadership grows stronger, but the pressure to balance old values with new ideas becomes harder. Voices for Change at the Vatican Summit. Since 2015, Tagle has served as president of Caritas Internationalis, a global network of over 160 Catholic relief organizations. Through this role, he has tackled issues such as poverty, injustice, and the migrant crisis, advocating for human dignity and solidarity across religious and racial lines. His commitment to addressing these challenges has solidified his reputation as a global advocate for social justice. Despite his elevated status, Tagle's humility remains evident. Known affectionately as Cheeto, he maintains an approachable demeanor and engages directly with people through social media platforms like Facebook, where his messages of hope and forgiveness reach millions. Cardinal Tagle's strong stances on controversial issues have further distinguished him as a transformative figure within the Church. He has vocally opposed the death penalty, emphasizing the sanctity of life and urging governments to pursue justice without resorting to harsh measures. His critique of political corruption and efforts to address climate change demonstrate his holistic approach to social justice. By highlighting the human impact of these issues, he calls for decisions rooted in respect for dignity and the common good. This perspective has sometimes placed him at odds with prevailing governmental policies, yet he remains resolute in his advocacy. The interplay between traditional and progressive voices within the Church became particularly evident during the October 2024 Vatican Summit. As diverse opinions clashed over the Church's direction, Cardinal Tagle emerged as a central figure in these discussions. Pope Francis, in addressing these tensions, warned against imposing personal agendas and underscored the importance of unity. Within this context, Tagle's voice offered a blend of respect for tradition and openness to reform, showcasing his nuanced approach to leadership. On October 2nd, Pope Francis opened a major session on Catholicism's future with a strong message. During the opening Mass for the Synod on Synodality, he urged attendees to stop treating their ideas like weapons in a debate. He warned against pushing personal agendas or refusing to listen to others, saying it only leads to unproductive discussions. The gathering, held in Rome, was no small event. Around 400 delegates from all over the world came together to complete a consultation process that began back in 2021. This initiative, which Pope Francis started, encouraged Catholics everywhere to share their views on how the Church could become more inclusive. Millions of Catholics responded, and the diversity of opinions was staggering. In the first session held last year, there were intense debates about controversial topics. These included the handling of clergy crimes, the role of women in ministry, and the inclusion of people with different sexual orientations and gender identities. The discussions even tackled the very structure of church authority. As the delegates met again, Pope Francis shifted the focus. Instead of endlessly debating divisive issues, he wanted to explore how the church's structure could encourage more participation from its members. He also emphasized finding ways to embrace legitimate differences between local churches around the world. During the opening Mass at St. Peter's Square, he spoke about the need for understanding and truly listening to each other. This, he said, was the only way to discern God's voice within the church. Setting the tone for the assembly, the delegates began with a two-day retreat, led by Dominican Father Timothy Radcliffe. Using the metaphor of a fishing net, Father Radcliffe explained how the church could hold together the many cultures of the world without falling apart. A net, he said, needs both empty spaces and the ropes that connect them. Both are equally important, symbolizing the balance between openness and unity. The retreat's themes were echoed in the diversity of the procession through St. Peter's Square. Delegates from different Christian traditions, lay representatives, and clergy marched together, showcasing a visual representation of the Church's global community. Pope Francis, now 87 years old and relying on a wheelchair, greeted them at the altar. His leadership has made synodality, a collaborative and inclusive form of governance, the cornerstone of his papacy. He reminded everyone that the issues they faced were significant and sensitive, requiring humility and a genuine effort to achieve harmony. But beneath the surface, there were hints of unease. The push for unity and reform wasn't without its critics, and some wondered if things were spiraling beyond control. The Synod's decisions bring big changes, but they also show the challenges of keeping everyone united. Pope Francis makes history again. In October 2024, Pope Francis finalized a groundbreaking document from the Synod. This marked a major reform in how the Church operates. The document proposed expanded roles for women, greater involvement of lay people in decision-making, and structural changes within the Church. Unsurprisingly, not everyone was thrilled with these changes. However, opposition found little room to challenge the Pope's authority. Even Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, who had shown subtle signs of disagreement, ultimately supported the Pope's vision. What made this synod particularly unique was the Pope's approach to the final document. Instead of issuing a traditional apostolic exhortation, he adopted the proposals directly and pushed for their immediate implementation. This 52-page document, approved by 355 synod members, outlined significant steps toward church renewal. It called for more leadership roles for women and substantial structural reforms. While some conservative voices within the Church remained skeptical, they chose not to disrupt the broader unity. Pope Francis's commitment to renewal went beyond administrative reforms. On December 26, 2024, he visited Rebibbia prison in Rome to open a holy door and mark the start of the 2025 Holy Year. This powerful gesture highlighted his focus on hope and the dignity of those often overlooked by society. He also used the opportunity to call for much-needed reforms in Italy's prison system, addressing issues like overcrowding and inmate welfare. His visit followed a meaningful Christmas celebration, during which he delivered a heartfelt message of peace. On Christmas Day, the Pope gave his Urbi et Orbi address, marking the beginning of the Jubilee year. Speaking from St. Peter's Basilica, he called for global peace and reconciliation. The Holy Year, expected to bring 32 million pilgrims to Rome, carried themes of hope and healing. The Pope's decision to open the second holy door at a prison rather than another grand church was deeply symbolic. Rising from his wheelchair, he knocked on the chapel door and crossed its threshold, mirroring his earlier actions at St. Peter's Basilica. He expressed his hope that people everywhere, inside and outside prisons, would open their hearts to change and hope. This dedication to prison ministry has been a defining feature of Pope Francis's leadership since 2013. His numerous visits to prisons around the world have consistently emphasized the importance of compassion and second chances. During his Christmas address, he also made a direct appeal for peace in the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. He urged leaders to pursue negotiations for a just and lasting resolution, even as reports of violence continued to emerge. But not everything about this period of reform was smooth sailing. Within the church hierarchy, subtle tensions simmered beneath the surface. Cardinal Tagle, known for his more traditional views, occasionally found himself at odds with the Pope's approach. While the Cardinal supported the Pope publicly, some of his private reservations hinted at deeper disagreements. These differences reflected broader debates about the direction of modern Catholicism. One of the key points of contention was how to implement change. While Pope Francis focused on structural reforms, Cardinal Tagle advocated for evangelization through modern tools like social media. This clash of priorities revealed the challenges of balancing tradition with progress. Yet, despite their differences, both leaders shared a commitment to guiding the Church through this transformative period. As the Church moved forward, many wondered what these changes signaled for its future. Was this a true turning point, or would the reforms face resistance from within? Pope Francis's bold decisions left little doubt about his determination to push the Church toward greater inclusivity and participation. However, the path ahead remained uncertain, with both supporters and critics watching closely. The Synod on Synodality was a historic moment for the Catholic Church. It highlighted the challenges of addressing deeply rooted issues while navigating the complexities of a global community. Pope Francis's leadership brought both hope and controversy, leaving a lasting impact on the Church's path toward renewal. Is Cardinal Luis's challenge to Pope Francis just a disagreement, or could it be the start of a major shift that changes the Catholic Church forever? Are we witnessing history in the making, or is this debate a passing storm? Tell us what you think about this heated exchange and its possible impact. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more.